Welcome to another episode of the Heritage Buildings podcast. I'm Vincent Reed, and today we are thrilled to welcome Ben Naylor. Ben is a true craftsman and the visionary founder behind Jack Badger, which is a company dedicated to bespoke architectural joinery and the preservation of historical building techniques. Now, from its humble beginnings in a hay barn at Ben's family home, Jack Badger has grown into a highly respected and renowned company, celebrated for its commitment to honouring traditional craftsmanship. Ben's commitment to preserving craftsmanship of past generations has set his company apart, producing handmade, authentic pieces that reflect historical accuracy and remarkable attention to detail. In recent decades, this craft, like many others, has been overtaken by advanced machinery and automation. The existence of individuals like Ben and companies like Jack Badger is not only rare and refreshing, it's also essential to the heritage buildings industry. So Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us. You made us sound very fancy there. Thank you.
You are very fancy. I've seen your website and your work. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, it's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, no, pleasure. So I start by asking my guests, I'm just interested in your background and how you started.
Cool, right. So I suppose the ball started rolling. My dad's actually the stone version of us, pretty much. But as a one-man band. So he's gone down the route of learning about more sort of the historic methods of stonemasonry. And I've been going to work with him in holidays and whatnot since I was probably about 9. I don't know, maybe a bit earlier. So kind of developed a taste for doing something manual then, I guess. And he introduced me to, and he also develops a bit of a work ethic that I think that's really important. That what we've done here has taken a massive amount of graft. There's plenty more graft to do, but up to this point, it's been hard going. Like a lot of legwork. So he introduced me to his friend who used to be run a joinery company in Glossop, where I'm from, and I started going there in some half-term holidays and whatnot when I was maybe 14. It was great experience as a school kid. When you're at school, the thing you want to do is leave and get into work and get. You don't want to be doing school particularly. That was how I felt anyway. And I had the fellow I was working for. He said to me after a few sessions working with him, look, if you want a job when you finish school, you can come and have an apprenticeship. So I kind of. Luckily, I suppose, look, you could say it's luckily, or the fact I went and showed some initiative and put some hard work in meant I had a nice job offer for finishing school. I had a mild panic just before my GCSEs because I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like I've just put all my eggs in one basket here. And I'd maybe not, I'm not very academic specifically. So anyway, I rolled that out. Started with that company, and I did about 4 or 5 years with them. Did an apprenticeship, learned stuff. They were a similar flavour to us, and then just got to the point where I wanted to. I actually wanted to go travelling for a year, and the only route to that I could see was to leave there and do some self-employed work for a while. So Jack Badger kind of pretty much started as I'd left that company, which is about 2004. It was unofficial. It was just me for a year, and then my sort of pretty much co-founder Rob, he joined in with me. We used to work at the same company together, and he came and joined in. And under the sort of guidance of my dad, if you will, not the guidance so much, but the encouragement. And he would be like, "Come on, look at how they used to make things." And he took us down the route of all the good stuff, like keeping things nice and wobbly, the aesthetic of our offering. No one's doing this, and it was the thing that really, I don't know where it comes from. I couldn't tell you. It's not like I had an epiphany or anything. I've always just been really into that style of work. My personal era is probably like medieval joinery. That's what I like. And Rob as well, or Big Rob as I call him. He looks a bit like a Viking. He's like a big hairy fella. Me and him have just then spent about 5 years just on a hill at our old workshop, pit sawing, crosscut sawing, side axing, learning all of that. We didn't have a chop saw for about 4 years because we were just like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it all by tools, by hand tools. So, and that skilled us up massively in that area. And then we kind of started having people join us a little bit, and I did eventually manage to go traveling for a year. And then when I came back, it was just a sort of an unconscious decision in a way. I was like, right, felt like I'd got something out of my system. I felt like I'd settled down, and I was ready to kind of do something. That's when we set Jack Badger up as a company, and that was in 2010, I think, right? So that was when it kind of all the learning about business, because it's traditional joinery is one thing, but actually what's really important to create the likes of Jack Badger is having a mindset that will that's sort of like that's happy to learn about other stuff that's probably out of my comfort zone initially, you know. All the business stuff that used to scare me when I was younger, and you realised with mentors and people to help, you can quite easily learn all the nuts and bolts of a company, which means that then you've got like that's the foundation for building your passion on, I guess. You know, they've got to go together. You can't have one or the other. You've got to have both.
Yeah.
You've got to have the eye on the prize and the thing that drives you. You know, and that's always been both. Look, I've been lucky that both of those things have been in my mind from the start, really.
So can I just interrupt? So you and one other, and you're working out how to do everything by hand.
Yeah.
How were you earning money?
Well, I was young, and neither of us had any particular overheads. We were working from. When I left the other company, my granddad had a hay barn next to our family house, and it was sort of a half-done workshop downstairs. Okay. So when I left, the first thing I did was turn the space, or start turning the space into a workshop. So my dad has been unbelievably supportive the whole way through. And you know, if we couldn't pay the rent one month, he'd let us off, and we've kept a tally, and we've sorted him out now. But over the years, he's kind of supported us loads in that way, and it gave us the platform to basically just trial and error, because that for us is the only way that we've been able to do it. You know, there's no particular. There's a lot more colleges now that seem to be focusing back in on the sort of the traditional skills and the hand tools and whatnot. But at the time, it was slightly more. You did a joinery NVQ at the closest college, and that was your sort of the method of learning. So we ended up utilising National Trust buildings, old houses, reference books, and we've built our knowledge out of our own experience and hands-on sort of trial and error. But the environment that we had allowed us to do that. You know, it's a difficult thing to try and do if you had a family and a mortgage, and that changes it, I imagine. Yeah. You know, so I'm very fortunate.
Because were you competing with other joinery companies at the time when you were doing that?
So we probably fell into a bracket where we were small enough that we weren't a threat to anybody who was doing a similar type of work. We had such low overheads that we could price ourselves accordingly at the time. And also we were different enough from the other small joiners that we had an edge there as well. So we kind of, you know, that gave us, the first client we had was a lovely fella called Paul, and he had a house over near Kinder Reservoir at the end of the reservoir, like amazing house. Used to be owned by, or it was the summer retreat of Agatha Christie. She used to go and write books there, and I got introduced to him quite young, maybe like 19, 20. And then when I went on my own, he was like, look, if you want to do some work, I need a load doing. And he just gave us, along with the platform that my dad had given us for low overheads, Paul gave us free rein. He was like, "Look, I can see what you want to do. I can see what you're trying to do. I love your aesthetic and your style. So just yeah, I want a door for there." And then we would design and make a door that we kind of we drove the whole process, which is amazing. I mean, he ended up with so much stuff in his house, all amazing stuff. But he gave us that platform to get going. So I'll always be grateful to Paul for that. It's good. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I can't remember what we were saying then. Sorry.
but so you and at that time when you're working and you were starting to do some joinery for that house, what machinery were you using? How much were you sort of try and stick to traditional techniques and methods?
So it's always been about a blend for me. I think that you can get caught, you can get stuck in the romantic side of things too much, or you can get stuck in the what's got to be really commercial side of things too much. But for me, where we live is kind of in between. So we've always said, me and Rob always said that we pretty much had a Victorian workshop. So, you know, we'd have a planer thicknesser, spindle molder, rip saw, maybe a dim saw. That was pretty much the sum total of being able to convert timber so far, you know.
Yeah.
But then you do have to make it commercially viable at the same time. So we've always had a rule that it's more about the mindset of how you approach joinery. So trying to adopt more of a medieval mindset or a historic joiner's mindset, rather than being a super purist. Just think, well, okay, CAD, for example, or a laser room scanner or something like that. If you had a medieval joiner and they were like, right, we're going to do this job, and they had the access to that, of course they'd use it.
Of course,
because it's just, they would, you know, like their objective was to get everything as square and neat as possible. We can do that really easily now. So we kind of reverse that bit and try and keep things wobbly. But also utilize tools and methods that will, without affecting the integrity of the design or the aesthetic of the design, will utilize bits of kit like CAD and scanners and whatnot. It's like I say, it's more about the mindset.
But in those early days, you obviously we didn't have CAD. Oh, you probably did actually in 2000 and such and such.
No,
yeah.
Well, it would have been out there, but I started off just drawing everything with a pen and pencil on paper, scale ruler, 2D, and then we went on to Coral Draw, which is a 2D package.
Yeah,
it's kind of like sign. I think sign makers use it quite a lot, and then I found SketchUp. So I used to be like, I mean, I'm not a CAD person, I'm not an IT techie person, but needs must. And it was kind of like, okay, well, how can we, this isn't good enough, how can we do a 3D one? So I started learning SketchUp, self-taught SketchUp, and I used to do all of our designs for a chunk of time. And then Big Rob, who's randomly got a background in computer science as well as traditional joinery, he's picked up SolidWorks, and so SolidWorks has been the platform we've been working on ever since. You know, we've got a few different ones now for different purposes. Your concepts might be done in SketchUp. Your SolidWorks is for all your techie drawings that go into the workshop. AutoCAD might be used as a communication between architects and also clients, or sort of those reference drawings you have to give over sometimes to get things signed off. So yeah, there's been iterations in every element of the business. It's been very exciting and very interesting learning it all.
Yeah,
it's good.
And you were so just you and Rob at this stage, and you were working on this house that gave you a really good foundation.
Yeah.
You had your sort of basic machinery, but were you then dressing the surfaces with an adze or a scrub plane or something like that to try and give it a little bit more texture and detail?
Exactly, yeah. We tried to, anything that you saw, any elements of what you see, we would finish with hand tools, and we would emulate that. We're trying to copy this, so the best way to copy X is to use what they used to get X. So, if you're after an ad's finished, use an ad's. Loads of people, when we turn up with our stuff, a lot of people think it's reclaimed or antique, and they're like, and when they find out not, they're like, oh, how have you done the surface? I bet you've used a grinder with a wire brush in it and stuff. And you're just like, no, why would I use that? You're trying to get a finish with a different tool. It doesn't make sense. So that is what we've tried to do. Where we use the machines, or where we use Pfizer machines, is where you've got, say you're putting two surfaces together, and historically they would have tried to get them as flat as possible. But a lot of the fail points you see on old stuff, and this is where observing and looking at old buildings and the stuff in them is really important, because you can see what has worked and what hasn't worked. You've got like a shortcut for what you should be doing by just looking. And some of the things that seem to be, when doors start to go a little bit loose or things sag a bit, and it's usually because they didn't have quite the capabilities or the machinery to get things really flat and nicely fitting together. Yep. So there's points hitting each other, and you just can't get the same friction. So we would use machinery or modern ways of flattening off things that go together, so they're inside, so you never see them, but they make it a better job.
Yeah.
So it's not, a purist might disagree with that, a supreme purist, but we think that, again, it's that mindset. If they'd have had this, what would they have done? Well, they would have flattened them off, because we know what they were trying to do. So, but we've got the capability to go, well, look, we love what the finished product looks like, but we want to make everything inside it as long lasting as possible. I mean, I don't like doing things more than once. So anything we make, I just want it to last as long as humanly possible. And if we do that, that's the job done. That's a tick.
And do you think when you're working at this, going back to that house, do you think that what you were charging the customer was in line with what the local joinery company doing it all with machines was probably charging, or were you slightly under because you were learning at this stage?
Hard to know, really. I wasn't. I suppose. I think we were kind of in a position we would generally, and a lot of customers don't trust this, but this is where trust's really important. Is a design will often price itself. So if someone can give you a budget, you can design to the budget. Yeah. If you know what I mean. Otherwise, what you end up with is a complete. You can over design it, and then so we would have often asked Paul in this case. Yeah. How much do you want to spend on this? And then we'd always, and this is where we're built on over delivering. So we would say, yeah, okay, that's fine. We're never gonna make loads of money off this, but that wasn't the objective. So we would end up doing a design that was far more involved than the budget allowed, but we just wanted to do it. It was just the way that we were working.
And were you at this stage thinking of just you two for the future, or were you thinking of expanding? What were you thinking at this stage? Because if you're doing this, and it sounds like a fantastic opportunity that you had, there must have been a point where you thought, okay, there's two of us, we're going above and beyond to produce this amazing work. However, the price that we're going to be able to charge another customer, it may not be commercially viable. I mean, at that stage, what were you thinking? Was it just going to be the two of you, or did you have these big sort of plans for the future?
Well, it's a weird one, that, because at the time, that time you're talking about, but before I went away and before it became a company, I was just enjoying myself. We were just having fun. We were just loving it. And we were, as long as we were earning enough that I was just into climbing and surfing and biking, and as long as I had enough to kind of do that in my spare time as well, I was pretty happy. It wasn't, we didn't follow any hours particularly. We just kind of, we were doing what we were doing. But then when I came back and we started the company, again, I didn't know where this had come from. It was just like, right, okay, that's what we're doing now, or that's what I'm doing now. But then I found we had to do a mock interview when we were about 13, 14 at school, just to kind of like prepare you for the world or whatever it was. And I found it in a drawer, like, you know, when Jack Badger had been running for a while, I can't remember how long. And it said in it, it basically like, the question was, what are you going to do when you leave school? And that you had to give a comprehensive answer. And it said, I'm going to go and learn how to do joinery. I'm going to go traveling, and then I'm going to set up a company. And I was just like, I couldn't remember writing it. It's almost like, you know, a manifestation thing. Accidentally made it happen. So, you know, it's I don't know really. It's just been something that's evolved.
Yeah.
And then I've been very fortunate that the people that from the start, because we didn't have anything to particularly attract anybody at the beginning. It was just, look, we're doing this. Do you fancy it? And it was just a few people joining. There's two other guys that have been with me pretty much from the start of Jack Badger, James and Jamie, and they're both. Like I've been so fortunate to work with so many nice people, and a good few of them have stuck around. So I think. Yeah, I think they helped change. You know, it's like you can only really deal with what you've got. So like them joining kind of made me go, oh, cool. Well, we could do this, and then we kind of got another couple, and before you know it, you've got something that's growing, and then
Yeah.
people encourage you down the path, and you know.
But how did you keep an eye on the commercial and the financial aspects? Because you now got two more mouths to feed.
Yeah. So it was, again, like I said, I'm not academic, so the amount of stuff I've learned to do with business and operating a business since the start is mind blowing to me, and that's been heavily helped with having mentors along the way. So business mentors. So initially there was a government backed subsidy for paying half towards a mentor. And a mentor got suggested to me, and which went on to work with her for a little while until the funding ran out, and that was great. And then when that kind of ended, she gave me loads of support. She helped us build the structure. She taught me things about overheads and, like, you know, how to price and margins and that sort of thing. And then after she'd left, I'm trying to think how many of us there were. I mean, say we got up to maybe 5 or 6 of us, and I got recommended to go on a NatWest. It's called it's a bit of a long name, the Entrepreneurs Accelerator Growth Program, I think it's called, and it's put on free by NatWest, which is amazing. And they you go every other week. You go for half a day into Manchester, into a hub where there's 50 other businesses who don't know particularly what they're doing. And they have these amazing speakers. They have all these workshops that teach you everything to do with it. And me and James went on it together. There was a point where James was in the workshop, and then James, you know, you know, it's good to know what you're good at. And I knew I was struggling a bit with some elements of the business. And he mentioned, he was like, look, I think I can help you on some of this. And so he's made a transition from the workshop into the office with me. I mean, we both still keep our hand in the workshop, but he then came along on this program with us, and we got a coach as well. So you would do a little catch up meeting with the coach before you went into and right at the end, it was a 6-month thing, and right at the end, Annabelle, she was called. She was great. She really helped us. She said, "Look, I can help you with, do you want investment? Do you want contacts? Do you want putting in front of people? What do you want? I can help you when you've not asked for anything yet." But we've never been interested in that. We've always wanted to grow at the right pace for us, because otherwise, if you overstretch, you're accountable to other people, and then they start to tell you how you've got to work, and everything changes, and that is not what I'm interested in doing. So I thought, well, okay, I don't know really, and it popped into my head. I said, well, if you could find a mentor for us, then we used to have one, and it was amazing, and we haven't got one anymore. So at that point, she was like, right, okay, leave it with me. And then a week later, a fella walked in and said, oh, I'm Austin. I'm mentoring some of your young businesses. and he had a big bandage on his finger. And she said, "Oh, what have you done on your finger?" And he's like, "Oh, well, my hobby is woodworking, and I want to be a mentor." And she was just like, it's how I don't know, the universe provides, maybe. But yeah, it turns out he really likes woodwork and he wanted to be a mentor. So we've been working with Amos now for, God, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years maybe. And he's the support that you get. We have fortnightly meetings with him where we all get a chance to sit down together and talk about what's, it's working on the business or in the business. I know none of this is to do with woodwork, but it's all very important.
Very important, yeah.
It's all the stuff that when someone looks at your social media, they just see a certain thing, but there's so much underpinning it to allow for that to work, And I think some people challenge it. They're like, "Oh, I've seen you using, molding planes on your on Instagram, but you only do that for the cameras." I'm like, "No, we don't. We do it. We do it where we need to do it. But you've got to have all this foundation in place to be able to do it. You've got to show people, what you can do to be allowed to do it." And it's also had a real a good effect as well. We're in, I don't know if you know where Glossop is, but we're in a small village town just on the outskirts of the Peak District. Sort of like you go out of our workshop door and you just up into the moors and you're towards Sheffield. So it's lovely, but it's a little bit remote. And we had a bit of a worry, how are we gonna find enough people who are passionate about medieval joinery? But what's happened is we've kind of, it's that whole sort of almost build it and they'll come. We've got loads of people who've relocated to Glossop. They've wanted the lifestyle change as well as the fact that they're looking for what we have as a job. So we've ended up with people moving from all over the place to come and work with us, which is amazing, really.
And how did you, when there was the other two joined, and they got 4?
Yeah.
How were you getting work? Were you advertising? Was it word of mouth? I mean, if you're stuck in the middle of, it sounds like it's pretty remote.
Yeah.
You're not in the middle of a city where somebody sees your advertisement on a billboard or something, so they ask you. How are you getting the work?
So initially it was all word of mouth, and I might have got introduced to somebody, and then it snowballed a bit, and then one of their friends sees something you've done, and you get. So it's that was initially, but I think the important thing. And this applies to far more than just getting work, but I think looking out for opportunity and keeping your eyes open. People talk about luck, but I actually think luck is just having your eyes open to opportunity and the chance to do something. And we ended up one of the first big sort of well, there's loads of failed ventures in this as well. We tried to put a load of stuff into a showroom for a place over in Cheshire. It wasn't the right place. It wasn't the right crowd. It didn't work. But we put a load of effort in. I mean, and we spent loads of money and time trying to make it work. Didn't work. That's all right. Don't get down. Just move on. So we've kind of had a few bits like that. But then we ended up doing I don't know if exhibition is the right word. It was kind of in a field in Yorkshire, in Ripley Castle. And it was just, I think it was, I don't know, 300 quid for a stand. When I say a stand, a patch of grass in a field.
Yeah.
And when we turned up, we were like, oh, it was a reclamation fair, basically. So we were thinking, oh God, we're probably at the wrong thing here. But there was nobody else there was no one making. It was all just vintage reclaimed stuff. So we stood out really quite well. And we took like a 2-ton fireplace with us and got it off a trailer with rollers and because I used to kind of try and do stuff together myself and my dad a little bit early on. So we had this massive fireplace set up in the middle of a field, and we took a load of doors and everything we could and built this stand. And off that, which cost 300 quid and a bit of graft, we ended up meeting a designer who got us in with a guy who, over the years, we've done so much work for, and it's that little thing of just, it's effort and enthusiasm And if you've got those things and you keep your eyes open, I think you find the way. Just kind of remaining positive and keep putting yourself out there, I guess.
Mm.
I mean,
Sorry to interrupt.
no,
What I'm interested in, because I'm loving having this conversation, because I've obviously spent years, working by myself and having a company as well. So it's really interesting to hear somebody else's story. But at that stage, then obviously now you've got to be commercial. You've got to now be turning a profit. Or did that come a little bit further down? You realized that you couldn't turn a profit initially, and then you were going to do that later, or what was happening there?
yeah. So what would they call it? Like a loss leader, I
Yes.
suppose. And that is what we're built on, being a loss leader, because it's a bit unusual what we do, and people aren't used to it. You've got to show what you can do. You can't just explain to people. You've got to show it. So the way we did that initially was through photography. I was always a bit, a lot of what we do is the texture and the feel of it and how tactile it is. So getting that across in a photograph is quite hard until I found out that people who are amazing photographers can kind of capture all that just using light. And so that was early on, we saw the value in that photography. So that's where we built a website and a really nice photography on there to kind of, and to show people and to give people a gallery. Because I found it again, the first thing I used to do was, I had a load of photos I took on my first digital camera and put them on a CD and printed little covers and posted them out to interior designers and never got anything back off it. I just sent all these CDs off into the world.
Thinking you're going to get, a massive project.
And then being really surprised when no one rings. I'm like, why didn't that work? You've got to try it, haven't you? But so there's, I think that there's definitely a point where it's like, okay, right. So then, it makes us sound quite old, this, doesn't it? But the internet's the easy to access internet and websites was fairly new then. It wasn't something, we were on dial-up in the workshop at the time. So as that sort of started to really gain traction and building a gallery, it gives you, it's like your storefront is more global all of a sudden. And you can sort of we've always had a really specific way we want to come across as a brand. Again, I don't know necessarily why. Why it is. It's just my taste, I guess. It's like how I want it to look. And I think a lot of people over the years, when they take a punt on you, they see your website, and this is a way back now. They see your website and they make an assumption that you're quite a big outfit. And then by the time you've actually delivered something and it's just what they want, and then they stop worrying about how big you are or how many square meters you've got or whatever it is. So I think that was quite a good way for us to start winning some bigger jobs as well, because it changes people's opinion by just I've got a website and we spent some time and money on a nice website. It does the job. It's like they're all tools, aren't they? To just, and it's all about giving people confidence. So long as you've got the skill to back it up,
to back it up, products,
then the trick is confidence.
Yes, and the time and time again, I come across craftspeople, individuals that have started up by themselves. They've been going 2 or 3 years, and I say to them, "Great, where's your website?" And they say, "Well, it's coming. I haven't quite got it yet." And and I say, "Right, this is the best bit of advice I'm going to give you. Well, for a start, now you can get a website up for next to nothing. Back then, it costs quite a lot of money. But I say, get a website produced and spend money on some professional photography. And a simple website, professional photography." And that's what you need. It's absolutely essential.
Such a good investment, honestly. And then we've been fortunate enough as well that my sister did photography degree at uni, and didn't want to pursue. She didn't want to pursue photography per se because she really enjoyed it and it would spoil it. But she's ended up joining us a good few years back now, and so she's our in-house. We've got our photographer who we've worked with for lots of years, who does all of our big website stuff and the sort of big scene setting. But then Harriet, my sister, she's bobbling around the workshop with her nice camera. So that's why a lot of the Instagram stuff is good, because me and her share an opinion on stuff, and I fully trust what she does. So if you go far enough back in our Instagram, you can see the point where I stopped doing it and she starts doing it, because I had all sorts of random stuff on there which was nothing to do with woodwork. I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to learn how to use Instagram to promote a business. I didn't know what I was doing, so I did the best I could, and then Harriet took it over and made it really good. So
yeah, I know it's so important, isn't it, to have that? Now I've got to ask about the name, because I was speaking to my wife last night, and she actually listens to these podcasts, so I'm going to give her a mention now. So I'm going to interview this really fascinating chap tomorrow, and I said your name, Ben, and then said about the company, and she only heard Jack Badger, and she said, "Oh, I love that name," thinking that it was your name. I said, "It's not. No, it's not his name. His name's Ben Naylor. The company's called Jack Badger." She said, "Oh."
I've met quite a few Jack Badgers over the years. They always come up and go, and I'm like, no.
So where did that come from? Because she would definitely want to know.
Yeah. So I mean, the moment when you again, I couldn't tell you where the idea of trying to build more of a brand was than just a company. I could have called it whatever, couldn't I? Something really straightforward and simple, and does what it says on the tin, period, joinery, or something like that. Yeah. And I went through all those iterations and it didn't quite feel right. And then we were starting to look at names of tools to see if we could use something, like ads, or I don't know what. We were just looking through that. And my dad actually was walking through and he overheard. And when he moved to Glossop, he started off doing a little bit of joinery with a guy in our town who's sadly passed on now, but and he was called Mike Gallagher, an old school joiner, and he had it's like a skewed rebate plane, Jack rebate plane. Yeah. And his name for it, I don't actually know if this is fully the real name, but his name for it was a Jack Badger, because it's a cross between a Badger plane and a Jack plane. So he always had one of these, and my dad was always going on about it. So when he was walking through, he was like, "What about Jack Badger?" And it was like, oh yeah, that it kind of just clicked and stuck. And ever since then, anybody that hears it, they're just like, oh, I love it. And they always ask what I get called Jack a lot, or Ben.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You must get called Jack all the time.
All the time. But it's also a really good tool to fend sales calls, because everyone was, oh yeah, can I speak to Jack, please? And you're like,
that's brilliant.
So there's another. I've just told everyone now, though, haven't I? So they'll all just be like, no, I'm not falling for that anymore.
Yeah. Do you ever say, yeah, hold on, I'll just go and get him for you. Just wait for me.
Yeah. Put him on hold.
Put him on hold. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, my wife would be happy that I asked you that question.
Yeah.
Now, so the craft of joinery and traditional craftsmanship, you have a passion for that traditional craftsmanship and how it was done, and you never ever thought, oh, if we could expand, we could get twice the size and we could bring in lots of machines and we can, make more money or anything like that. It never ever tempted you.
No, not as a business decision that we've gone after. I think that as you grow, managing being bigger is different as well. So there's been the odd job we've done. I mean, I could pick one. In fact, I'll tell you about this one in a second. But occasionally, you end up doing sort of jobs that are you need to do really sometimes. But we always apply that mindset I was talking to it. So if you find yourself having to do some slightly more normal joinery, if you wouldn't want to call it that way, you just have to make sure you don't go down a slippery slope where you lose what your belief is. So
Yep.
you can still use traditional joinery and all of that mindset and apply it to something that doesn't maybe look on the surface quite as oldie worldy. That's where we aim for the oldie worldy stuff, like the medieval joinery. That's definitely where we aim for. But then, for example, we won we won a wood award in, I think it was 2014, for some Gothic tracery doors that we made. And then the following year, have you heard of Wallpaper magazine? It's like
No.
It's a global sort of really fancy. It's a bit like I don't know. It's a bit like Vogue, but for design world, for the
Okay.
design world. And what they do is they have a show, or they back a part of a show in Milan called. You're gonna make me say it. Right? Salone del Mobile, I think it is said, and it's the biggest furniture show in the world.
Okay.
And they have a big sort of centre part of it. And what they did was, because we'd won that, so we kind of ended up on their radar because we'd won a wood award and we were very traditional. And then what they tried to do was they got a maker and a designer that were very different, and they'd stick them together and give them a brief, and then you would make something for the show, and then you'd have this big presentation hall with all these kind of weird and wacky things in, because they wanted to see what happened when you put a really contemporary designer with a medieval joinery company. So that was a fascinating project that we did. It nearly killed us all because the timescales were so tight, and there was a deadline was the show, and we ended up making the centerpiece for the whole of their area. So we did this whiskey bar. We got partnered with a Royal Salute Whiskey, who are kind of the sponsor Polo, and they were like a more of a high-end whiskey company. And we worked alongside Sally, whose company is Studio Macereth. And when you look at what she does, it's supremely contemporary versus what we do, which is the other end. But it was great. She loved coming to the workshop. We had a really good relationship, like designing it, and we ended up. The first thing was, I've got this design, so we're gonna make it out of bog oak, which is oak trees that have fallen down or been cut down a long time ago, fallen in a bog or a river or been buried, and then they stay there for thousands of years, and then when they come out, they're like a super black color. I'm sure you know what that is, but just for context.
Yeah.
So she wanted to do it out of this timber, and she was like, "Oh, we'll do it all veneered," and we were like, "No, we're not doing that. We don't work like that. We don't have any CNCs. We don't have any veneer presses. We're not doing that." So then we said, "Well, we'll tell you what the construction is, and you tell us what the design is, and we'll work together on it." I mean, I could talk about this particular project for hours because it's so nuts, really, for what we ended up doing. But I'll try and be brief. So me and Rob went to Croatia he doesn't fly, so we went on a 24-hour train there and a 24-hour train back to go and look at this wood that they dug out of the bottom of a river, the River Sava. We had to buy enough wood, then we came back, then we got it shipped over. We were using, this is where the mindset thing comes in. Our machinery was only so accurate, and we had to do, for example, one part of it would be, it was circular, and it was made up of wedged end grain pieces. So we had 160 pieces that went round the segments. And if you're 0.2 of a degree out on your machining, it doesn't work. It doesn't meet.
No.
So we had to I've got like a 1970s planer that's amazing and it's built to last, but they're not built for accuracy, they're built to last. So we ended up having to, Rob parametrically drew up a false bed for the thicknesser that you could change the angle on. So we had to thickness a bit of wood, which changed the blades, thickness a bit of wood, measure each side to see what variance we had. Then we had to change the model on the computer, send it to the laser cutters, and then it all slotted together. and then put a bed on top of it, and then we'd slot that into our machine so that we could get to within like 0.01 accuracy on our 1970s machine. So why I'm telling you this is we were doing a contemporary thing with unsuitable machinery, and the thing that got us through it was that sort of problem solving, old school mindset. I think of it as an old school mindset. You know, I think that's people just didn't let things stop them. It seems like they were just so hardy, they just got on with it. And I say that because you were talking about modern joinery. Well, you can still kind of do it without losing your roots, if you know what I mean. You can do it without, but it's not something we chase. But if we've done it, then we've done it, and it's and we've done it our way, you know. So we've stuck to our guns. I think as soon as you start selling out, that's when you're in trouble, personally.
Yep. And what happened when, let's say, your first really complicated job, up until a certain point, you were just doing some, really nice, simple joinery, and then somebody said, "Oh, please, can you do this sort of tracery work or something that's detailed and carved?" And you didn't have the right person to do it, or you couldn't do it. What happened? Give me a bit of a scenario, how you then progressed into that more complicated work.
Well, I think you respond to you can steer things to a certain degree, but then you respond by who joins you as well.
Yeah.
So that can shape it too. So I mean, early on, I would any small amounts of carving, I just learned how to do it myself. I just had to play, like we were just able to just take our time with things. So I would do some small amount of carving. Rob could do a small amount of carving, but then a guy that we both used to work for wanted to come and join in on the workshop as well, and he another Rob. It's like we only get people here who've got the same name as us, basically. But he's still here now. He's trained up since 3 people, but when he joined us, he'd been carving for 20 years. So he was, and his approach to carving, it was the same as our approach to the joinery. So it worked really well. We would make stuff with, have collaborative design on how do you want the carving to work with the construction of it. So we could make things that were really specifically made for how the carving demanded it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and then, after a little while with Rob, he said to, because he says he don't want to retire. He's, I don't know, he's maybe 70, mid-70s now. But at one point he kind of said, "Look, I think we need to be teaching some other people this," which I was really chuffed that he was up for doing, actually, because some people just want to do. I know I've met loads of people who aren't interested in passing things on; they'll just take it with them, and that's a shame, a real shame that. But yeah, he's put a lot of time into training. So we've got another carver called Ben. And we've got Liz and we've got Tom. So there are sort of 3 that Rob's had a hand in training. So we've got a pretty decent carving team now. I mean, we've even got we're in a new workshop. We moved from the old hay barn because there was 11 or 12 of us there, and it was just insane. You couldn't move. It was like climbing over each other. So we've now moved downhill, and we've got a little an actual carving part of the workshop now that's just got those guys in. It's amazing. Like you'd love it in there. There's just all the sample carvings that they do for testing and jobs and trying new designs out. They're all on the wall. So it's definitely it's the place everyone gravitates to when they come for a visit.
Yeah, I need to come and visit you when I'm up your way.
Yeah, absolutely. More welcome. Welcome. It'd be great to have you up here. Right.
So now I want to take us through the process of, I'm just going to pick something like, let's say, an external oak 15th century style door. Yeah. And for our viewers, so they can get really insight, what is the process from start to finish?
Okay. So to get to what I'm just about to tell you, it's taken us a good few years of trial and error. So you will find that you'll go and look at the sort of say like a medieval cross-batten door, horizontal boards on the back, vertical boards on the front, fixed together. That's fine, all the while you're putting that door into a drafty stone surround with a curtain on the back of it to stop the wind. But basically, it's kind of not inside or outside, it's just there. That's fine. But when you then move fast forward to now, and you go, right, we're going to put that door on a really warm house, and it's wet on the outside and warm and dry on the inside, causes all sorts of problems. So what we find is that your starting point, and this is for two reasons, your starting point, it might sound silly, but is understanding your timber and what you're trying to achieve. So selecting the wood is a massive part of our job. Aesthetic is, if you use the wrong wood, it doesn't look right. And if you use the wrong wood, it doesn't work right. So you've got to understand both those things when you're selecting your wood. That is your start point. And then you're in with a fighting chance. It's like if you miss any point in the process, it causes problems later on. And so
it's funny, Ben, sorry to interrupt, but I did a presentation, I think it's for Historic England, and I was talking about the lost art of timber selection. And the carpenters and joiners would have been able to walk into a forest and select the trees, know exactly what would work for what. And when the tree was cut down, they'd still be able to look at pieces of wood that is a lost art now and say, great, we can use that for rails and stiles because there'd be less shrinkage with this or less movement with that, and that won't twist. I mean, it's astonishing. They were so clever and they knew exactly what they were doing. And that's why we appreciate now, an original 15th century door, because those guys knew, I'm sure you'll agree with me, they knew exactly what they're doing with selecting the timber.
They knew far more than we know. A lot of our reference books aren't just reference books with images. They're incredibly helpful from a design point of view, but a lot of reference books will have, like there's one, have you ever read The Village Carpenter?
Oh, I've never read it, but I've seen. I've seen it.
You should totally read that. And it was the content of that is so amazing. It was actually a young lad that was academic. He was not interested in manual stuff at all. But his dad had a village joinery company with like 3 or 4 guys that were operating. His dad died and passed the business over to him, and he ended up having to run it. And he just wasn't interested. But what he did was he wrote like memoirs of watching them and how they worked. And so he's documented. I don't actually know. I think it's from like the 1800s, where he's documented how their approach to everything. So it's this real like front row view of how they worked in the 1800s, and you just realise like, oh my God, what they knew, and it's just honestly, it's humbling, really is. When you read books like that, you just think we should know so much more than we do, but that's how it goes, isn't it? I guess. But,
no, so you're saying that selecting the timber, how long did that sort of take you? Was that trial and error? Let's say you selected a piece of wood that you thought would be good for a panel, and then you went back 6 months later and you think, oh, that was the wrong choice. How long did that take you to learn and get your eye in to select the right wood?
Well, you have a bit of a head start again. The whole thing that I was saying about looking at designs and seeing what has worked and hasn't worked.
Yeah.
You can go a bit further than that and say, well, all right, well, this particular board has rotted off this door, or it might be a construction thing. It might be the fact that you're looking at it going, well, the timber's not cut right. You can get an oak tree, and you can either make it usable for, and I didn't want to sound rude then, but you can cut it in different ways for different applications. But predominantly, historically, it was quarter sawn. Now, quarter sawing is not a very commercially viable thing as a big outfit. We're lucky that we work with 2 guys who've set up a company that just quarter saw oak. So that's all they do. they're fascinating to talk to, like because they're like another level of geeky.
No, they're
But so
coming on the show. They're coming on the
yeah,
show.
yeah. Well, I probably chat to you. I'm sure. I can tell you his details. But yeah, they're fantastic, and they've built their own jigs, but they don't. They're not trying to take over the world. They're not trying to scale it all up. So what's happened is there was a lot of effort in quarter sawing wood because you would have pit sawn it predominantly if you were sawing it, or you would have riven it if you were trying to get panels out. Either which way, it always goes with the medullary rays in the oak. So you kind of get this stable, waterproof, pretty wood. And when you start noticing that, you're like, oh, it doesn't take you long to once you realise they're the sort of the fundamentals of oak that's cut nicely, that works nicely, then you can start to apply that to looking at old buildings. I mean, I've also been very fortunate. Big Rob, he's a savagely clever fella. So I've had a really good sounding board to look at things with, and both of us start to dissect it, and both very, very geeky and enthusiastic about. Like I say, I don't know where it's come from, but yeah, it really helps you kind of hone in on things, I guess. So, sorry, I'm off down a rabbit hole. So, yeah, the timber selection's really important. But then even with the right timber selection, what we first started doing was just making cross pattern doors, which is fine. But as soon as you put them in a house, they start to want to cut because you've got these opposing forces. So we've applied what we know about wood, what the requirements are for modern projects. It's going to be cold and wet outside. It's going to be warm and central heated on the inside. And we've tweaked the design. So this is what I'm saying. The outside and the inside they're all hand tooled. The boards are all hand tooled and they're all quartz sawn, so it's really nice and stable. And then the method of fixing is either peg and wedge or nail. So there's no glue in there per se. And both those fixings are unbelievable. Like they're just so satisfying to do, and I've seen countless doors with them in from 700 years old. Still operating as a door. It's like someone's done something right there. But then what we did was we introduced a layer in the center of the door, so a framework with some cork insulation. So we have like a fully natural insulated layer between the doors. And we've then also, again, knowing what timber generally behaves like, you can then bake in things like the right margins, and this all leads into I think the finishing side of things as well of the door, an external door. We don't put anything on the outsides of our doors; they just stay completely raw, and you can do that so long as you make it right. If you don't make it right, you can't do that. That's where you need to start sealing it, and inevitable wood will move. It's not going to not move. That's what it does. It moves. You've just got to try and control it as much as you can by, again, trial and error. Look, we've made doors that haven't worked. We've gone and sorted them, but if you don't know, you don't know. But then this is the whole process, I guess. And yeah, if you do put a finish on the outside of a door and then it starts to crack and move, what will happen is you'll get moisture in behind the finish. And then you start having problems because it can't escape. So then that's when you start getting rotting. And as long as you give it somewhere to go and you construct it so there's no water getting in through the door, it will just go lovely. It'll go that lovely silver colour, and all the wasps will come and start to eat all the soft bits of the wood, and you'll get that sort of, it's almost like a bit like driftwood sort of, I guess, extreme version of it, where you get a load of texture and the grey, and then you get natural highlights because the sun catches it at a certain angle. It's just, it's just one of those. It's just there's no other way for us, I guess.
And a lot of people, in my experience, they panic about wood getting wet, and I say to them, as long as it can dry out, it's fine. And I've my house is about 1840, and I was looking at there's some pendants. It's sort of a bit of a Gothic revival. Now, those pendants are original and there's no paint on them at all. So they're
No.
170 something years old, and
Yeah.
they're softwood. They're not even oak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be good quality Scots pine,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
they haven't, yes, they've been finished over the past, but now they're bare. They're still there, and they get soaked, but they
Yeah.
dry out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
As
where
long
there's
as wood can
like,
dry out, it's not going to rot.
yeah, if there's pockets or ledges or, it's like making sure there's somewhere for the moisture to go. I can't remember now exactly, but I think it's wood will only rot if it gets above 24% and stays there.
Yeah,
All the while it can keep, and it rains a lot in England. That's part of its charm, but it doesn't rain that much. More often than not, it's blowing up wind across it, which is drying it out. So as long as you kind of give it half a fighting chance,
yeah.
then we've had quite good success. I mean, obviously you got to build weather seals into your doors and thresher bars on the floor and stuff. But again, as long as you approach it in the right way, it does nothing but add to the design.
What was the idea of modifying the internal section of that external door? Was it purely for thermal properties?
It's thermal and stability.
Okay.
So it gives you a framework that kind of stabilizes the door as well.
Yeah.
So
I see.
it's again, it's been trial and error, and you kind of do something and think, "Oh, why has that not worked?" You've got so much you can look at from the old buildings, but then you've got to keep an eye on what you're doing as well.
Mm. But
Build, measure,
sometimes
learn.
you'll see old joinery also, and it's not always quarter sawn. And
Yeah.
so for our listeners, quarter sawing is basically take the end of a tree trunk and you sort of cut cake sort of wedges out of it. That's one way of quarter sawing. So that's a technique. And then there's another technique that is through and through, which is basically where you're just going to put your saw right the way through the section of that timber, and that's through and through. And
Yeah.
and a lot of joinery I see, it's not always quarter sawn. Some of it's through and through, and it's a
Yeah.
300, 400-year-old door. And I look at that and I'm thinking, I'm fascinated, Ben, by
Yeah.
the moisture content of that. What did they typically? They didn't have moisture meter readers then.
Yeah.
Would they have gauged the moisture by weight? Possibly. I mean, how did they know time that it had been seasoned? That all was probably documented so thoroughly as well, being seasoned.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, look, it's just my what I imagine is the case, but I would have thought that they would have been very aware, a bit like people were much more in touch with the seasons. And now, when you work indoors and you don't really get that connection, I think that they would have just been much more aware of how long this timber had been. The person that was supplying it would have been all over it. There was a massive amount of pride in what you did, your element, and you wouldn't want to you wouldn't want to get some timber converted and then sell it on and it'd be rejected, because that's like, that'd be shameful. So I imagine there's quite a lot of actual respect for the materials that meant that you'd end up with some timber that would work. I mean, there's a rule of thumb for drying timber, which is a year per inch. So if you're cutting
Yeah.
an inch board and you leave it a year, that is air dried. Theoretically, that gets you down to sort of like whatever 14%, maybe 12% if it's inside, if it's undercover. So I think that would have been very much the case for how they would have got it dried.
And they probably wouldn't have cut down young oak trees. They probably would have had to
Yeah.
be established oak trees before they
Yeah.
cut them down, because the older the oak tree, the more established it is and more stable it's going to be.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, the other thing as well they'd convert it in the forests a lot of the time.
Yeah.
If you think about chopping a tree down and then trying to get the entire tree out, how hard that is versus digging a pit there and pit sawing it in, or riving it down into usable chunks and then getting them dragged out.
Yeah.
So I imagine the same thing happened with wind-blown trees as well. I mean, when we first started, we bought a pack of quartz on wood we did before we found these other guys who do it, just that's all they do. We found a company that would quarter saw for you, so you could say I want an X amount of cubic meters or feet of quartz on. They would actually saw it up for you. So I remember the first time we ordered a pack of that. It's like really expensive, and we kind of almost didn't want to use it. It was that nice. It was amazing though, having it on the shelf was, because often you can, that through and through process you were talking about, you can take the center boards out, and that's similar. You're getting halfway there, sort of thing. But we now at a point where we have the guys that quarter saw timber. They'll ring us and say, there's some trees, because the way it works, you were saying about the people who could look at trees and tell what the wood was going to be like. Yeah. They have a guy who's 80 odd who does that for them.
Oh, so fantastic!
He'll go out to these wind-blown trees or felled trees, because I've learned so much from quarter sawn guys, because I was a bit doom and gloom about British English timber and how we didn't seem to grow it very well. We've not got a whole lot of space over here. So you look at France and Germany and you see the scale of their plantations that they're growing it from. You never feel like you get that here, but a lot of the estates, the royal estates and lesser estates, I guess, will have that'll be a big part of their output. So they're very expensive places to run the large scale estates. So they'll get revenue streams from anywhere they can. So like Chatsworth will do it, and we've got a tree in at the moment from Glamis Castle, sorry, I keep getting the pronunciation wrong. And he'll go and he'll look at it and be like, that one's worth having. And then they'll say to us, there's this tree, it's X amount. We buy the tree because it helps with their cash flow. They convert it for us, and then they pass it over once we're done. So it means you can get timber with provenance and like almost a certificate from where it's come from, which people love. You can really you're getting a piece of history, I guess, from that side of things. So it's such a nice place to be there. Now we used to sort of dream of that. We'll get to one day, we'll buy trees and have them cut for us, and now it's happening. So it's great.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And then just going back to your door you've modified the inside. Now, have you put any sealant on the edges where the door goes up to the door jamb? Have you got anything at all?
No, we don't take the finish round there. What we would do is we'll put a nice, like a good quality, couple of good quality waxes on the inside. So it just gives it, like, feeds the wood a bit on the inside, gives it a bit of a sheen, bit more tactile. But because on the edge of the door where the frame is, you've got a modern weather seal, like an EPDM weather seal.
That's what I was wondering more about the weather seals.
Sorry, not a sealant, a seal.
No, weather seal, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we do seal the edges, with a seal. And have a thresher bar in the bottom. Whether it's stone stooling, the stone step gets cut, or it's a brass bar or something, it just keeps all the moisture on that side of the door, so it doesn't. But
then, how on earth do you decide on the optimum moisture content of the timber? If you've got, let's say, you're putting this door on a in a hotel that's going to be roasting inside. And then you've got one side really hot, the other side you've got to the elements. The thing is that the person that made that door 500 years ago didn't really have that issue, because the houses were so damp and cold anyway, with just a fire keeping it warm. The moisture content and humidity was just so much higher. So it was more natural for that door to be placed in that building, because it was more like its natural surroundings. But nowadays we have a real problem, don't we, with central heating, people being comfortable. So how would you go about the moisture content? What do you decide on?
Well, I mean, so they were so unbothered by that element of it that a lot of the doors that if you imagine two boards going together, they wouldn't, you can see through, because they wouldn't have even had rebates or tongs or anything where the boards join. They'd just be buttered up, and then they'd move, and the ones on the front would move, and you just get holes through. So they definitely didn't care about that. A big part of what we do, again, so it's kind of like layers of, like I say, if you get one wrong, it doesn't go well. So making sure you pick the wood, the right wood that will move the way you know it's going to move. So the difference between quartz sawn and through is one will cut a lot more than the other. The other will stay stable and move that way.
Yeah.
So then the next stage, okay, we know that wood's going to do this. How can we sort of like counter it with a design? So then the design of how wood goes together means the outside, because it's not even as bad as that. It's like, well, in the winter, it might be wet for ages and cold and not get the sun. So everything's going to swell in the winter. And then in the summer, you might have a heat wave for a month, 2 months, occasionally happens. And it'll shrink back again. So you can't even count, you can't really think, oh, well, I'll get that specific moisture content and that'll fix it. It doesn't work like that. You've just got to make sure your design is right so that everything can move the way it needs to. And you've got enough tolerance for things to move so that you don't have that problem.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing on the inside, generally speaking, that's the aim anyway.
And then what moisture content would you be using for that door then?
So you're talking probably about 12%, 10 to 12%.
So that's quite low. That's quite low.
Yeah, it's kiln dried. Something that again I've learned over the years is we've done a little bit of steam bending. I don't know if you've ever done any steam bending.
No.
It's quite an interesting process because it goes quite, it definitely goes bendy. But what I learned is you can't steam bend kiln dried wood. You can only steam bend air dried wood. This is my understanding.
Okay. Because
in oak or in timber you get the lignite, which is like a part of the sap, I believe. And as you air dry it goes a bit like chewing gum. I think it kind of starts to go solid, but you can still bend it a bit. It's still tiny bit flexible. It changes when you kiln it. It kind of sets it. It bakes it hard. So then you can't use steam to. You're not actually. The steam is for heating up the lignite so that you can bend it. So it kind of softens the wood by softening the sap inside the resins.
Yeah.
So you've got to use an air dried timber that's still semi malleable to be able to do that. If it's been kilned, it has much more of a tendency to just snap on you, split, because you can't soften it. It just wants to stay where it stays, sort of thing.
Because it's undergone stress.
Yeah.
So it's then once it's undergone stress, it makes it less pliable. I can see it sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes rigid. I can see. I understand that. Yeah. And so the other thing I was going to ask you was, one, the selection of wood going back to the medieval times in the 1600s, 1700s, and also the moisture content. And working wood with a higher moisture content is easier than working wood with a low moisture content, because, so for instance, with green oak, you can adds green oak much better.
Softer.
It's so soft because it's full of water. So a lot of this joinery that you find on sites, and you see adze marks, you see axes as well used, and also scrub planes used. I'm just interested in what moisture content would have been in that wood when they were dressing it. And with your experience, because you do a lot of adze works and axe works to dress the surface, have you done experiments with something, let's say, that's 10% versus something that's 18%, and what the difference is, something that's air dried and something that's kiln dried?
Have we? I mean, we've definitely had a go at. Probably not with a massive amount of structure, more just like, oh, that was better, and you start doing it, so you don't necessarily dig too deep into it. But I imagine back in the day that the timber framing type of stuff would have been pretty wet. I don't know exactly what moisture content, but it would have been green. and then it would have dried, and they would have installed it, and it would have dried over the years.
Yeah.
Because you can also, you can't put a nail into an old beam. You can put a nail into a green beam. So, but a lot of the sort of cathedral roofs, apparently, if you try and get a nail into it now, no chance, it's just going to bend. But they've got nails in them, some of them, like where it calls for it. So I imagine there was quite a lot of green work done. Some of my friends who are timber framers, they still use green timber just because you can't really. Well, it's so expensive to get. You can buy it air dried beams, but they're just so expensive that you've got to go with the green. And we've just found ways of working with what we know will work, if that makes sense. Like kiln dried timber, we know that is something that behaves a certain way. So we've tried to emulate the tool marks and that sort of that thing that you're asking about, the scrub plane and whatnot. We try and emulate that in kiln dried timber, just because we know it's a good stable base.
But is it easier with quarter sawn using the adze and the scrub plane because of the orientation of the grain, rather than something that's through and through? You can be happily adzing, everything's going around well, and then all of a sudden the grain changes direction and you take a massive chunk out.
Yeah. It definitely from a plane. It's the same whether you're planing or adzing or the grain direction. Some boards will be super clean and they'll have the grain running all the same way, and they're like one of those boards. If you're cleaning it up with a spoke shave, one of those might take you, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes to clean up. The next board, which has got some knots in it and a wavy grain, could take you like 50 minutes, So this is where, again, the selection comes in, because it depends what you're looking for, what your job is. If it's a paneling, some paneling, you want it quite clean and neat, and you'd be cleaning it up with a coffin plane with the grain, those little tiny wooden planes. That's what we would use for that. If it's a beam and you want some knots and you want some shakes in it, you'd get a big number 4.5, and you'd be with a scoopy blade and you kind of go at it. So it's different tools for different jobs, and different results call for different timbers. I think what you're asking though is, I think it's, if you hand plane an air dried board or a green beam versus a kiln dried, it's a lot easier. It's just softer. It just peels off differently. You can get the same result, but it's just one takes a bit more effort than the other.
Yeah, it seems sometimes when you look at these marks from an adze and you look at them closely, it seems to be a very clean cut, and it seems to be, say, the convex shape is nice and dense, almost that wood was quite wet when that adze took that piece of wood out. Because you can you can sort of tell the difference. It's had an easier route through the grain. So but what also interests me, and we are getting a bit technical now, but all our woodworkers will be happy with this, is that the fact that these doors that are 300 or 400 years old, that were in a property with high moisture content and cold, just with fires to heat the houses, and now in centrally heated houses, and they've hardly shrunk.
Yeah,
that's what amazes me. There's still the same door. You don't see a lot of. So you do sometimes see the shrinkage, but you don't see a lot of the cases. You don't see the shrinkage, and you think, my goodness, that door has lost a good 5 to 10% moisture, probably.
Yeah.
But now it's probably about 10%, and it probably went in about 18%. How has it survived? And it's probably down to selection and construction, isn't it?
I think that, and also the fact, like we were saying before, people will know. It's a bit like the moonshine guys over in America who can shake the jar of moonshine and look at the bubbles and tell you how to within like 0.1% how strong it is.
Oh yeah.
There's so much tacit knowledge in all these little areas that I think we just find it hard to believe that people were so adept at knowing things. If you know what I mean, like, because they were so specialist, they had to be. Now we're a lot more of a bunch of sort of. We've got to be a bit more jack of all trades, haven't you? You've got to know a bit about everything, and not helped by Google and stuff. But something that's interesting. So a story that gives you an idea of just how in tune with what timber should be used for what purpose or for what part of the job. We've worked on the same property that Philip worked on, Ickham Place, and they had some fragments of gates. So it's from 1420, the house, and these fragments of gates that came out of the archway. They had them dendron chronology tested, which is where they take a core of the timber, and then they look at the growth rings, and they map them out with growth ring samples that they've taken from all over the world from different eras that they know. It's like a bit like carbon dating, but it uses the rings, and so they can tell you how old the wood is and where it's from. So these were gates, like carriageway gates, that were on a semi fortified manor house with a courtyard in the middle, and these were the gates that would have stopped people from getting in to the centre part of the house. And when the study came back, they were sort of like a framed up gate, amazing, like the knuckle joint on them, just everything. When you look at, you're not just looking at how pretty something is, you're looking at how it's put together. The way that the rebate worked in the centre and the construction of them was just amazing. It was like it's just so thinking outside the box, you know. But the wood that came back with this framework and these panels, all the framework was, all the timber was from 1420s, so it was from that era, so we definitely know it was from the period. And this is in 1420, so that's like good 800 years ago. All the framework was made out of fast-grown English oak, because you get a lot of flexible strength, sort of like tensile strength in that. It's a bit more bendy and a bit more flexible. So if you're trying to bash or open them, it's got more give in it. And then all the panels, which were much thinner, they were sort of like an inch thick. They were all they were Balkan oak, slow-grown Balkan oak that had been brought over in 1420 because they were more dense, because they were give you more resistance.
I mean, from where? The Balkans?
I think it's the Balkans, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Balkans?
Yeah. Yeah, so Scandinavia, Siberia, Russia, that area.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I mean, 1420, they're bringing timber from there for a specific use. That blows my mind. I mean, that's my understanding of it anyway. That is like, they just know about wood, and they just know what they're doing, and they know what they should use. Like, it's a bit embarrassing that in this day and age, we're kind of not better at this. I know. We're trying to relearn it all.
We've regressed. We've literally gone backwards.
We have, yeah. And you know, people talk about losing hand skills and the sort of traditional joinery side of things, which I do think there's a bit of a resurgence happening. Enough people have talked about it. There's the people we're getting coming to us asking if they can go and retrain or get jobs with us. They're like top of the class students who are coming wanting a job doing joinery now. It's like an amazing sort of like different appetite for it, if you will. But it's not just those jobs. It's the like the guy who selects the timber for the quarter sawn guys. You know, it's all those jobs as well that you've got to. They're kind of not in the limelight as much, but yeah, it's really.
And like you say, we have to be jack of all trades. But back then, every single process from start to finish, from selecting the wood to installing, making the door, installing it, it would have involved, several people rather than one person. Yeah. Yes, in the countryside, they had to be a bit of a jack of all trades, and you see these very crude doors and joinery. But on the better properties, that would have gone through a whole process, wouldn't it? Almost like a factory process. And somebody would have literally known how to select the wood. And then that would have gone over to somebody who maybe convert it properly. And then somebody would then, adds it. And that's all they would do. And their father would have done all the adzing. And their father before would have done all the ads. So therefore, it was a trade that was passed down, and they never got anywhere near joinery. That's just basically what they did. So this is why, you know, similar with antique furniture, there would have been somebody specializing in carving ball and claw feet, and that's
Yeah.
all they did. And they have
Get really
carved,
good at it.
yeah, get very good at it. After about
Yeah.
10,000 feet you've carved, you
Yeah.
know, you can do it with your eyes shut. And this is why these ball and claw feet are just, you look at them, you think, how on earth has somebody carved that out of Cuban
Yeah.
mahogany? It's just incredible. But the guy,
Yeah.
the guy was doing it all day, every day for 30 years,
Exactly.
probably.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
that's what's changed, isn't it, as well?
Yeah. I think that people had a trade, you know, a lot more of they identified with a specific trade a lot more, rather than that. I mean, what so that you know the word top dog and underdog,
Yes.
they both come from pit sawing.
Yeah, I know.
Apparently. So you know,
Yeah,
you
that's
got the guy
there's
at the
some
top.
people that disagree with that, but I love that story, and I tell
Yeah.
my customers that because I think it makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the guy
Um,
down below would have a wide brimmed hat to stop all the sawdust from like
yeah,
getting. And the guy who was more experienced would go up the top because that was the sort of like better, the less worst bit of the job, if you guess. I
and
suppose.
apparently you could be the underdog for 5 years. I mean,
Okay,
literally
right.
5 years.
Yeah,
Um, and they would have been covered in it would have been wet sawdust, wouldn't it? Basically, they just would have been covered in this really, really moist, wet
yeah,
horror with all the tannings and everything like that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the dog part comes from the metal
Oh,
wedges
right. Yeah.
that you stick in the end to stop your
And
saw
like
from binding.
yeah, the like spaces around the metal staple
Yes,
spaces.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
the term dog comes from. But
yeah,
yeah, I love those stories.
yeah.
I just want to move on to your view on. I get asked this quite a lot. Using reclaimed wood in historic buildings, and how you feel about it, because a lot of the clients, if you give them the option with their lovely 17th century farmhouse to put brand new oak in, or you say, look, you could possibly get some reclaimed oak or elm or some Scots pine, and it would, it's going to keep all the dents and scratches, and it's going to look amazing. 9 times out of 10, they want the reclaimed wood, and
Yeah.
aesthetically, it looks much nicer in a period property. But
Yeah.
then you'll have other people on another side saying, hold on a minute, we're not going to be able to read these buildings in years to come. Because if you start putting reclaimed wood in, we're going to
Yeah.
come in and say, well, right, how old is that reclaimed wood? Is it original to the building? Is it not? And a lot of people I know, a lot of conservation officers would just say, no, we are going to, you need to specify new oak boards in here. And sometimes I've even come across that you're not allowed to stain them. You can't do any
Yeah.
staining at all. So
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Do you want to go first? Because I do have a, I do, I do
I
have
can go
a,
first.
I
I have got
do
an
have an
opinion.
opinion on it, surprisingly. And I think I would probably suggest that you should approach it with as much common sense as possible
Mm.
and not get hooked on some sort of ideology about something. And I think there's ways to manage it. You know, like I've heard, yeah, we have quite a we do little SPAB, the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings. It's like a group, and they come around here quite often, and so I have this debate with them quite regularly. Because I think sometimes you want to use a nice bit of old wood if it suits. Sometimes you want to make something, but you don't have to. Just because you're putting new wood in doesn't mean you have to leave machine marks in it and not stain
No.
it. Like hand plane it and make it look the same as the other piece, even if you don't stain it, at least tool it up right so that you've
Yeah.
done it justice, and using the right kind of wood as well, because that's the other thing. I've seen loads of patches in old buildings where they've gone down the, well, we'll leave it really obvious so it's not stained, it's got machine marks in it, and it's not the right cut of wood. I'm like, yeah, but you've not even got halfway towards trying to show that you know what you're doing there.
Mm.
And I think that you could just, even if you just, there must be somewhere, like you have a bit of a plaque in the room, or have some sort of record book for the house where
Yeah,
you can talk about what it is. I think there is ways to manage it and not just it gets a little bit like like the teleprompter if you're not careful. You kind of if you just have one thought process, it's like, well, yeah, but can we just talk about how most like those fragments of gates are a good example actually. Um, there was that much left at the top, and it had the arches in it, and then they've been cut off in the Victorian times, and some pine ones put underneath that got that weren't really right, and we were in talks about redoing these gates, and the argument was, oh well, you need to dowel stainless steel pins into the existing bits of gate and rebuild them underneath so that. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, okay, so you want me to put them back on the outside of this building? That's fine. The resined in pins, it's not got a whole lot of longevity that. How long is the resin going to last when everything starts moving? And the fragments are way higher risk now than they would be if you put them on the wall inside, like mounted, put some nice lights on them, restore them if you want, put a plaque saying what they are, then take. Like it's more of an archaeological experiment. Then study the hell out of them and make them exactly how they would have been made using axes, adzes, pits up, whatever you want. Make them how they would have been made as an archaeological experiment. You'll learn so much from that process. You put them on there. The fragments aren't at risk. You've got some gates that have taken the really important bit of the example, which is the knowledge. The bit of wood isn't particularly the most important bit in my mind. It's the thought process that goes behind it.
yeah,
Because it's like that's the bit that you're going to lose. So if you can recreate that and then give it another few hundred years, well, that's better in my opinion in that instance. But then equally, we did a load of floors at the same place, and he'd spent ages collecting 16th century boards that we then laid. We had, they were from different floors. So we had to lay them and then blend them all in and whatnot. They look amazing. It's perfect for the house. It's what should be done in some instances.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject because I think what sometimes gets missed is the fact that you'll have clients that have got a healthy budget that want to put it into this house, the house. And there's got to be a compromise, because if we didn't have the wealthy clients buying these period properties, they're going to fall down.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
And if the rules are too strict, they won't be bought in the first place. So there's got to be a compromise. And I think there's a couple of things happening, with the reclaimed wood. I'm not one for trying to fake things and blend them in. For instance, when we do splice repairs on a paneled room, we don't try and hide that splice repair, but we do blend it sort of 50 to 60%. But I like to see the repair because it's a really good repair, and I want others to see, oh, there's a lovely splice repair there. So
I've got no problem with repairs.
Yeah.
Done like that. For me, it's like it's when the mindset gets too like at the forefront of the decision. It's like, hang on, let's use our logic here, and that approach sounds perfect to me.
It's a nice compromise because you're not completely faking it so people don't know, but also you're not putting a piece of new wood in there that's going to aesthetically look absolutely dreadful for the client and the guests that come into the house. So that's a compromise. Now, the thing about why I asked you about the reclaimed wood is because obviously for hundreds of years, and particularly even more so back 300 or 400 years ago, we were reclaiming more than we actually do now, because a property would be knocked down the road and they would take all the flooring out and they'd bring it up to the new property, or they'd bring the paneling out. There's hardly any time I go to a house and the paneling is original to the room or the house. It's it's very rare. It's very rare.
Yeah, the fancy ones, aren't they? The stately homes where
exactly. So that happens, but when you have your sort of a manor house and below, it's normally been reclaimed. So we've been doing this a long time, and then so it is a difficult one, but I'm like you, if a client wants a reclaimed board and it does get through planning, I try and encourage to put a little brass plaque in a corner of the room saying that these boards have been reclaimed. They're not original to the house. So there's some sort of record, and also any written evidence as well. So a report that goes with the house and the client, and then when they sell, you encourage them to pass this document on. And then at least you're not falling a conservation officer down the line, and then the client who's spending an awful lot of money on this house is happy. But it is obviously each project's different. I understand that, but it's quite a contentious subject, actually, that one.
It is, and ultimately, I mean, there's also an opinion from the client of what they want as well. I mean, there's a good example of a project we worked on, and where you can use reclaimed boards, you'll see on our website. There's a good example of this, where you'll see some of our doors which we've used reclaimed wood for. But what you don't see on that is you get a reclaimed board, and generally speaking, structurally they can be quite short. It can be a bit knackered, floorboards anyway, and that's your main source you've got. If you're thinking of making something out of old wood, generally speaking, you need old floorboards. And what we did on those ones was we skimmed the back of them off on the machine. We denailed them thoroughly, because that's the other risk. You put them through your machines and you're like, oh god, got a nail in it, and
planer blades.
And then we got some really nice thin quarter sawn oak, and we bonded them back onto the back of them. So we created like we did our own engineered boards with really gnarly battered wood on the front, really nice stable clean on the inside, and then we built our layers up like that. Now that's a way of getting an aesthetic with, again, we're using the mindset from perhaps days gone by, but with modern like clamping, like, I'm trying to think what they call them, like presses, like a frame press. So we frame pressing all these boards together. That's great. But then the same project, and that you can only have that without cover lats. So you kind of only really can do it if it's a flat door. Because the second you put something on that needs moulding or details, you're cutting through you get a reclaimed bit of wood and you put a scratcher a new moulding on it, or plain a new moulding on it, and you've got fresh wood again. So then you're like, no, you can't get any further forward, because you're like, well, now I've just made all these bits new. So you can only really do it in certain ways. But then for the same project, the same house, they wanted this other style of door with cover lats and whatnot. So we made all the doors, fitted them all, and then the client was adamant that he wanted them. When I say adamant, like, I agree with him, like, it was good. I kind of suggested, if you want these to get weathered and aged, a lot of them were going in a courtyard which was really protected, so it took forever for them to get weathered down. So it was suggested to the guy that we built at our old workshop up on top of the hill in Peak District. We built these frames that were sort of angled back and fitted all the doors outside our workshop.
Oh, I saw that on your website.
So we ended up weathering them for nearly 2 years outside our workshop before we fitted them.
Weren't you worried that they were going to move?
Not if you made them right. So it was good, and then we put them on, and it was like they were just like instant historic doors, and that's great. It's nothing that wouldn't happen over a few years anyway. We've just sped it up a little bit.
Yeah, the problem is if you let a door naturally silver, the base silvers, and then you get this pale top, so it looks really ugly for quite a few years, doesn't it? Because you've got the contrast. It can look really unsightly.
It can. I mean, there's an element to, if you put the handles on as well, and then you get that lovely sort of faded iron stain that comes off the bottom of the handle, and so there's things that you can't, that doing that process, you can't really you don't want to fake it. You know, that's not. I'm not interested in faking it in that sense. It's actually just, well, look, this is what would have happened, and we've just given it the environment for it to do it
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
But you do speed up that, you know, the bit what you just said about the dark top bit.
Yeah.
You do speed that process up as well. It just means it just looks the way it looks quicker.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I don't think that's naughty.
No, 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 no. I think it's good. They look really good, those doors. I saw them. I saw them in their frames in that field with snow in front of it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
really,
it.
really good.
That's it.
What would you say? There's probably been quite a few, and you might not want to say one in particular. But what would be your most notable projects that you've done to date? Your favourites? What's caused you, the biggest challenges, but then turned out to be amazing, and you look back and go, "Oh my God, you're very proud of that." Would you say?
Yeah. So if I had to, I mean, there's probably three probably standout ones for different reasons. The one that was most challenging was the Bog Oak bar that I explained before.
Yeah.
That tested us to almost destruction. I mean, the workshop lights didn't go off. It was different. It was different then. Well, there's probably a health and safety element to this story. But the lights
lose your fingers after 12 hours of working.
Yeah, so I think Rob's longest shift was 50 hours he did. He just didn't go to bed for 50 hours.
Oh.
This is a long time ago. The lights in the workshop didn't go off for a month. We were doing shifts. We were just like, because the deadline was so tight and it was so complicated.
Oh my goodness.
We got to at the end of it, we were all just like shell shocked, you know. It was, but what that did, just purely how much teamwork was involved in it. And how, it just made me, it makes me feel quite emotional just thinking about the guys that did it with us. Like we didn't, not with me, not for me, we did it together. It was like, before we did it, I said, look, we can do this thing here. I think we should do it because I think it's good and it will get us a lot of, it gives us some exposure. But it will be painful and we're going to have to do loads of overtime and whatnot. Are you sure you want to do it? And everyone was like, yeah, we'll do it. I mean, I think they might have changed their mind if they'd have actually known what was coming. They probably would have not agreed. But, it was like we did it together and it was painful, but amazing at the same time. It was just unreal. So that's quite a notable one for us. A totally different flavour to what we used to, The other one was probably the biggest job we got as an initial job, which was a place called Hanwell Castle down in just outside Banbury, and we got the door package for the entire castle worth of doors. We did a few other bits and pieces there as well, but that was the first real scale job we did. That was kind of like that moment of wow, okay. And then when we did that, we were probably on it for 18 months. We were working just on that project, and
that's putting all your eggs in one basket. That's challenging as well.
We've learned that you don't do that, but we've got through all of the eggs in one basket jobs that we've done because you haven't got much choice when we were up at the old workshop. There was only probably 5, 6 of us at the time.
Yeah.
And it was all consuming, but again, got to the end of it, and we've learned loads off this. We know not to do that. We know that that's good. It gave us the confidence to go. We can deal with big jobs here, and then I think the one that's probably like I don't know closest to my heart in terms of it being what my tastes are was Ickham Place. The clients were amazing. They both. I turned up and the first meeting we had, they were as geeky as I was about details, and we had a load of the same reference books. Like the difference was mine were sort of cheap ones and theirs were first editions or whatever, probably slightly better quality ones. But I just when you're working for someone who appreciates it.
Yes,
that's different. People can like it, but when someone appreciates it and they get it, that for me is that's a big part of it. And their house, how they approached it, the appetite for getting it right, the fact that they wanted it right, the whole thing was just great for me. You know, it was a really lovely experience. Going because you know, design isn't about one person sitting there going, I'm the designer and I can do all the design. It's all here. Even with that, we've got a design team, and it should be a collaborative event with anybody who's interested. And if the client's really interested, like, yeah, come and get excited with us. We get excited on our own if we need to, but it's great if you can get people who are having the stuff off you to kind of share in that a bit.
Definitely.
So that project, and I met loads of amazing people there as well. Look, I met Philip there. That was where me and Philip got introduced.
Yeah.
But there's so many good crafts people on that site. It was great. It was like just nice, you know. Some sites you go on and maybe they're not as friendly or not as nice. But that one was just, everyone was just nice and cared, and like, you know, I think I was scribing a framing with an axe just because it was just the way to do it. It needed a load off it, and it was going in an old hall, and we wanted the tool marks on the outside. But I with the big axe scribing all the side off this frame, and there's about like 5 people stood there just like wondering, like obviously never seen a frame getting scribed in with an axe before. It was just nice, you know, they're interested, and then they're asking and like looking and have a go at that, and it was just lovely. So
Fantastic.
That one's a good one for me now, you know. And we've got
it looked lovely.
For it to feel like we haven't enjoyed other sites. There's so many nice sites we work on. It comes with the territory generally, but those are the standout ones for me.
Yeah, and when I interviewed Philip Gaishies, we spoke about Ickham Place and the ceiling, and it sounded like an incredible project.
Yeah. That ceiling they did. Oh, it's amazing.
Yes.
It blew my mind. That was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. I was just like, holy hell, like amazing.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah, it looked incredible. So I'm interested, was coming up towards the end, but I wanted to ask you, you've sort of touched on it a bit earlier about the future of the craft. And it seems from what you've said to be quite positive in your particular industry. Do you feel that's the case? And are there young people interested coming through?
There are. I feel, you know, like you go through peaks and troughs, don't you, with these sorts of things? But I definitely feel like, and it's just from my observations of what sort of people are commenting and what they're saying on social media. It can be from that to who's sending the CVs through, you know. And there's definitely, it feels like there's a shift to me of people realizing maybe, and you know, I'm sure there's still a balance out there, but a lot of people think maybe just making money isn't all there is to it, and actually enjoying what you do on a day-to-day is very important, you know, like chasing the big money jobs. I mean, I think that's kind of that appetite seems to be changing a little bit, especially for a good few people. I do think social media has probably got a lot. I know it's got a lot of negatives, but in terms of an awareness, sort of raising awareness for things that people just don't even know can be done, I think it's amazing. You've got some like little person in a shed somewhere who's good with Instagram, and they just so happen to be a blacksmith or something. They can show what can be done to the world quite easily without even leaving the shed now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's kind of, there is benefits to it. But yeah, we've I think it's also important that people in our position should encourage it wherever possible as well. You know, it's like it's not just going to fix itself. We are responsible for that. I mean, I can't remember. It was probably about 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, maybe. And the local secondary school, I was looking in our scrap pile and I was thinking, God, some of it we give it to Rycote Wood Furniture College in Oxford, we pallet up our short bits, and I take them down every couple of months so that the kids there can use it for their projects. But before that, I sort of pulled all this wood out and thought, this is too good. So we came up with a little project, a 5-plank stool project. And I went down to the school and said, look, I've got these designs that we've, and we'd made a little booklet with like the how to do it sort of thing. And I said, I've got all these scraps of wood, don't mind preparing them for you. And I've done this booklet, like, would you be interested in me bringing them down and you can run them with some of your woodwork classes? And it was the head teacher was like, yeah, that sounds good, but would you deliver it? So then I ended up randomly going down there for a full term of school. Every Tuesday I'd go down and like help lead the woodwork class for the kids there. And it was really interesting to watch the change in the kids, because first day was like, oh, there's a new person in the class, and everyone was dead excited, and then the second day I was, I think it's a time and a resource thing, but I was getting them to saw to a line, and they were like, oh, we don't do that, we saw away from the line and file it back in. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. So I'd left enough length on that they could do a load of sample cuts. I was like, once you can show me you can cut to a line, you can cut to the line, and then you've got your final piece. So I got them to, and I made sure it was everything in it had to use hand tools to do it. And they kind of, the middle first bit there, they started to lose it because they couldn't really quite see it. And then the first person to get one of the stools together, they all just went, oh, that's what we're making. And then before you know it, they had one lad was taking a notebook home and he was designing all what he was going to put on it, and another couple of them had brought a load of the friends in from after lunch to show them the stool. They all just kind of like totally changed over the course of it to getting something at the end that they were really chuffed with. It was nice, it was like one lad, and I didn't think I could win him over at first. He was like, no, I'm really into just electrics and stuff like that. And so I thought about it, and again in the next week, and I was like, well, why don't you, for your next project that you're doing, if you talk to your technician, I'm sure he'll sort you out with, if you wanted to do some electronics, but you might make a little wooden robot that's got wooden components and mix it in. And he kind of went away inspired. And I think that sort of stuff is really important, because you don't know what part of the brain you've just woken up.
Yeah.
If any, you might not have done, but you got to try, haven't you? So.
Well, also the other thing is that a lot of these well-paid jobs in the city or whatever aren't going to exist in a few years' time because of AI.
Because of robots.
And nobody will be able to take our jobs. I mean, it's impossible to be able to pick a tool up and do it the way that we would do it. So therefore, I think, I mean, my industry it's quite gloomy, because how I learned was through the antique furniture restoration trade, and that obviously died about 15 years ago or so. So therefore, there aren't these antique dealers and furniture shops where they have apprentices and teams of people. Yeah. And it's difficult. You can't just put a 16-year-old on a manor house or a stately home and start saying, right, just learn on this piece of paneling. It's so I learnt my craft through antique furniture restoration, and then it's an identical process, method, whatever you want to call it, but just on a larger scale. When you take it into joinery restoration, it's the same.
Yeah.
I never ever get any phone calls from youngsters saying, is there any apprenticeship at all? But I do feel a responsibility. It's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts, is so hopefully youngsters can listen to this and go, oh, maybe there's a possibility there. So, I think I do feel a responsibility, certainly, because who's going to be doing, I want to show the people that I've learned. And when you think about it, your craft and my craft, over the decades, quality-wise, it's diluted and diluted and diluted, because we have lost all those craftsmen back then, in the 1700s were just phenomenal, weren't they? Obviously, the Industrial Revolution came in and then it all started going out the window in a big way. It is so important to keep it going. I'm not quite sure how I would do it because I'm just one, and it takes, you've got to have a bigger team, you've got to have somebody looking after youngsters, and it costs money, it costs time as well, doesn't it? Because if you've got, let's say, your foreman looking after a 17-year-old and they're spending 30 hours a week just talking to them and training them, that's 30 hours that they're not earning money for the company.
It's expensive. Training someone is very expensive.
It's really, really expensive, and you almost need to be paid by somebody to be able to train these individuals. And then I do wonder about sometimes the work ethic might be a bit different from when you and I were training. I can't imagine. I spoke to Philip about this, and I was treated quite roughly by some of the older craftsmen. And I just sort of had to toughen up and got on with it. But now, and I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, I'm just saying that now are the kids as tough as we were?
You can be too hard, but you can be too soft.
Yes,
I think that's that. Definitely. It's finding that. You know what our Jamie, who's our workshop manager, he's been with me the longest after all. His background is farming. Okay. And farming is a fairly tough background, where there's no messing about. You've got jobs to do, get on with it. And that does put a good work ethic into people. And I think that's something we look for sometimes over skills. It's actually attitude and work ethic. Yes. You can teach the rest of it. You can teach skills. If someone's interested and alert and up for it and wants to work hard and gets the buzz from that teamwork of working hard, you're more than halfway there. Yeah, and the basics of just turning up on time. Yeah. That's another one. Sounds daft, but and not just strolling through the door 15 minutes late as if it's not a problem. What? I'm only 15 minutes. I'm only 15 minutes late. Exactly. Yeah. I've had that before several times. And that's the importance of making sure you build the right team, because the amount of time in managing people, if they're not engaged or interested, it's not. It becomes it's a shame. But we've got a great team here that are all very on it and very up for it, so it's good. But I think you said, what can you do? You're one man and you can't train. I think what you just said as well, though, is you're doing this. It's massive. Yeah. All this stuff is great. It's what we need people. Yeah, and also it's so lovely. What I love about this, this is going to be around forever. We're documenting people's experiences, and that's why I sort of quizzed you on the business and the commercial side of it and how tough it was and how you made money, because that's part of it. It's not just a case of you being able to produce a brilliant piece of joinery. That's just a tiny fraction of it. Important, but it's you have to wear so many hats. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people don't quite understand, how tough it is. And you've got to be almost obsessive about where you're going and what you want to do. Otherwise, you won't succeed. It's as simple as that. There's a quote that's starting to start a business is like eating glass and staring into an abyss. There's definitely, I understand that. There is, the biggest thing of all of what we just talked about there is sticking at it. Getting back up again, keep going. That's what makes the difference. If you don't do that, well, the wheels will soon fall off. And I just got another question before we sort of wrap up. So give me what's the most rewarding aspect of your job? What makes you get up every morning and do what you do? I actually think it's the people here, to be honest. I think that just having, a few of us having shaped something that makes people want to come here and makes clients want to use you. And I suppose there's a certain element of pride in the fact that as a collective, we now offer something that so many people want and seek out. It's great. It's lovely, and I get to work with so many awesome people. You know, it's good, and I don't say that lightly. Like everyone is sound. That's been
That's
my main
fantastic.
thing, I suppose. I want to work with people I want to work with.
Yeah.
So it's so it's good.
Oh,
I suppose
wonderful.
that's it. Yeah.
And for anybody interested in learning more about traditional joinery, what would you recommend? You know, are there resources? Are there any organizations that you could point them in the right direction?
I think that the best thing we've done has been going round historic buildings. I mean, I love it. I've always loved it for whatever reason. But what you can learn just by going looking and having a go as well. I suppose it depends how you learn. Some people learn from reading, some people learn from watching, some people learn from doing. For me, having a go. Don't be scared. Just having a go. And then observing, I mean, reference books, it's hard to sort of list off reference books because I think that if you're trying to learn the basics, if you're starting off just like, okay, I'm gonna learn the basics of woodwork. One of our guys, before he got a job here, he came to us with CAD. He's now Tom, who's now the lead carver. He started with us as CAD, and when he was at his previous job, which was drawing insulation panels for car doors on CAD, I think he put himself through a couple of night schools courses, just for basic woodwork. So he was like, his self-development was there from that side of things. That mixed with books, you can get old reference books from libraries, closed down libraries and bookshops, just how to cut joints, how to use hand tools, that sort of stuff, and then just practice, and don't be scared and don't get put off. I think that's kind of got to be the starting point, really.
Don't be worrying about making mistakes. You have to make, as you and I know, so many mistakes, and that you can't be scared of making mistakes. You just have to keep on going.
My dad would say, a mistake's only a stupid mistake if you make it more than once. Otherwise, it's a valuable lesson,
Yes.
And I think that's kind of that's how it is, really.
No, I completely agree. Well, look, thanks ever so much, Ben, for joining us today and sharing your journey, your insights, and your passion for traditional craftsmanship. It's been so good, and I said to you before, one woodworker to another, we could spend hours talking. But yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure, and it's been also just fascinating to learn more about you and just the incredible work that you're doing. But before we go, where can our listeners find out more about you and also about Jack Badger and your projects?
Well, I probably should know all of our Twitter handles and everything, isn't it? But Twitter, it's not even Twitter anymore. So the best bet's probably our website, which is just www.jackbadger.co.uk. If you're on Instagram, that's the other best place to go, and that would be Jack Badger Ltd is our handle. Those two places probably your best place to start. But yeah, no, it's been great being on. Thank you for having me.
No, not at all. And we'll put all the social media links and everything in the show notes on YouTube and on Spotify. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much again for your time, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Okay, bye-bye for now.
See ya.